All right, you turn friends. I'm bringing someone on the show today that has so much wisdom that I'm constantly watching, noticing, sending, sharing. I'm really excited to bring her here to you. Her name's Jillian Turecki. And if you don't follow her on Instagram, are you even on Instagram? She's a certified relationship coach, teacher, author, and she is the host of the podcast Jillian on Love. I really encourage you to check it out for your love life. And she's fueled by an insatiable curiosity about what really makes a relationship thrive. She's helped thousands of people over the last 2 decades with her teachings, her courses, her writing to really revolutionize how they are with themselves and their relationship with themselves and how they show up in their romantic relationships. And she's been sought out nonstop for her compassionate, direct, and very authentic style of teaching and coaching. So you could check her out at Jillian Turecki, and I'll put it in the show notes. She has a global membership for women and so many other really valuable things for you to see. And today I want to talk to her. You all know that I do really well being present with where I am in hopes that maybe there's something that I'm going through that will be useful for all of you too. So, where I'm at, I have a partner that I love. I think it's the right person. And I think everybody is either in a relationship and they're married and they're still wondering, was this even the right person for me? What does it even mean to be with the right person? What are the things to look out for as you're making that choice? So I'm going to ask Jillian all the things. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, I feel like everybody on podcasts probably ask you like what got you into love, but I imagine you went through your own heartache in finding the right relationship for you. But can you just take us into like what was that moment where I don't know, like things really started working for you in love and like what was happening that made things really work for you?
Um, Honestly, it's when I became more comfortable with who I am and more comfortable with myself. And it was that was a huge part of it. And then another big contributor to that was getting very clear about what it is that I need in a relationship and from a man. And these were that goes well beyond I want someone who treats me well. I want someone who I'm attracted to. I want someone who I laugh with. I mean, obviously those are important things, but I started to take into consideration what I actually needed and the kind of life that I want to build with someone. And I just got very realistic about that. And honestly, just learning how to appreciate myself and love myself is a very big part of the process. So it wasn't like a moment.
Yeah.
It was a series of moments, It was a
Yeah.
series of moments for sure.
The thing that gets me kind of stuck is like, I feel like I'm in such a good partnership. And I feel like a lot of friends will say, oh, like I changed and I called this in and I created this now and I did all this work. And here's this person that is a reflection of the work. But what I found for me personally is that I don't know, I kind of look at who I'm with and I kind of think to myself, well, I don't know if this is a reflection of all this work or maybe it just feels like luck sometimes. Like, yes, I've done work on myself,
Mhm.
but the guy right before this one was not emotionally available enough for a marriage, right? Or the kind of partnership I was looking for. And I feel like there's always that tipping point where finally you find the right person.
Mhm.
So I'm always kind of curious to understand, like, is there really something that I was doing, or was it just like lifing, and I found something good finally after sifting through the bag of
Mhm.
possible partners,
It's a very good question. I think what's necessary is to break down our understanding of what it means for someone to be a quote unquote right partner. Because oftentimes it's about, we think, oh, I do the work, like you said, and I'm going to meet that person who reflects all the work that I've done. Well, part of that is true. If you are someone who's always chosen people who are mean to you, or if you've gotten into if you've been you know, I use the word unhealthy as a very general term. If you've been in relationships that have been unfulfilling for both you and the other person, and frustrating for both you and the other person, and hurtful to both you and the other person, then, we all enter a relationship with a certain level of consciousness. And what I mean by that is a certain level of maturity and skill.
Mm,
And so when we find ourselves in better relationships, it means that we have leveled up, for lack of a better way to describe it, our maturity and our skill. And we're choosing partners from that place.
mhm, mhm,
And so I think that that's really what it's all about. I don't think that is it luck? No, I think it's selection.
mhm,
It's selection. Are you selecting from a place that's, more from fear and your wounds, or are you selecting from a place where you're looking for superficial qualities as opposed to being very keen on someone's character?
mm,
Or, so it's really about selection and
mhm,
how we show up. And if we've done a certain amount of work on ourselves, what does that mean, doing work on ourselves? It means that we have more self awareness and we have more skill.
mhm,
And then we choose someone from that place. And we hopefully choose someone who has a similar level of self awareness and skill. And you both have to be willing to put in the work to make it work.
mhm, mhm. I love you talking about selection, and it feels like it should be obvious advice, but it's not, right? Like you would think it's obvious to say who you select is part of the game, right? But people are out there really trying to teach like a bird to fish, right? Like there's certain, I don't know what that quote is about, like birds fly, fish swim, like you can't teach a bird to swim. And so like a fish does. I don't know. I get caught up in this idea that like I'm optimistic about people growing. I'm optimistic about people becoming who they want to be. And I think the reality is that maybe too many people are out there being optimistic that they're going to change someone. And it's interesting. I actually just opened up my journal the other day and it was like it was one of those journals I have so many that like it just kind of lost itself in the shuffle. And then I open it and it looks like every year I would maybe do a few entries in it and then God knows where the other entries are in the other journals, but I saw myself from 2017 to now. And I kind of looked at it and laughed and I thought, wow, I've grown a lot, but I'm still the same. Like it kind of felt like this weird juxtaposition of like, oh, I've changed so much, but I haven't. And
Yeah.
so I don't know, like, what is your thought on if somebody's going to change or commitment and like wanting to grow? I don't know. People always say people don't change. I think they do, but not too much. I don't know. Any thoughts on
Okay.
that?
So, yeah. So, there's a few things. One is one of the most common and biggest mistakes that people make is thinking that they're going to change the person who they're in a relationship with.
Mm,
Or they meet someone, they think, they just need to change this one thing. They're going to change for me,
mhm,
and even if this is unconscious, it's like they're trying to be the inspiration for this person's change, or they're trying to change them. It never, ever, ever, ever works. Ever. Ever. It is one of the top 5 reasons why relationships will, crumble and fall apart.
mm,
I think that every human being has the capacity for change. Not everyone, many people, most don't.
mhm,
Because to change, you have to go through a lot of discomfort.
mhm,
And so I think that there's always a part of us that feels like it never really evolves.
mhm,
Because there's that saying, we are who we are, and there's always going to be certain things that we struggle with.
right.
But I think that, first of all, people change. In Everyone's evolution is their own business. Everyone is um changing at their own pace. People who don't evolve or grow at all, meaning they don't mature in any way. So let's define growth. You start to see things differently.
Mhm,
Maybe you had a very, very narrow minded perspective of something, and now you're more open minded. Um,
mhm,
you're kinder to yourself when you used to be horrible to yourself. You're
mm,
kinder to others. You're kinder to others when you used to be not so nice to others. You You have challenged certain beliefs that you have about the world, that you look at things differently. So this is all signs of growth.
Mhm.
There are people who don't grow, and the people who don't grow at all or evolve at all end up being very, very miserable.
Mm.
And so you always kind of, um, growth equals really happiness, honestly. And so I think that the most, there was a lot of questions that you asked in that one question,
Yeah.
but the most important thing is when you start seeing someone, sure, you can have your one of your top values be growth. Like I'm someone who wants to learn and to grow, and I want to overcome my ego. I'm willing to look in the mirror. I'm willing to learn how to love and to be loved. And you could say, I want someone who has that same willingness to grow.
Mm.
And that can be your non negotiable.
Mm.
But you also have to say, I love where this person is now. You
Mm.
can't say, they would be perfect if they only changed this one thing.
Mhm.
The moment you're saying that to yourself is the moment you're playing a very dangerous game with yourself, and you will lose the game of love if that's how you enter a relationship.
Mm. Such good advice. It's funny, it's like this person would be so great if their entire DNA strands weren't impacted by their anger issue the whole way through. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or this person would be amazing if they just stopped drinking. This
Yeah.
person would be amazing if they just had more money. This
Mhm.
person would be amazing if they lost this weight. Whatever it is, this person would be amazing if they just had a different career path.
Right.
You can't, no, no, you have to really be okay with where the person is now.
Yeah.
And of course, you want to have that growth mindset once you're in the relationship, but that's different than wanting something about them to be different or change. And
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah. 100%. Okay, so let's talk about, for the people who are listening and they're in a partnership, they're married, whatever have you, and maybe in the privacy of their own heart at night, they're really struggling to accept their partner. They're really struggling to accept that this is the right thing. Or maybe they're in a serious relationship and they're all in and it just feels really inconvenient for it to not be the thing. What are some of those things that you think are really not workable? Because you kind of talked about like if it could only change if.
Yeah.
Once somebody's really committed, I see people on TV shows. It's like they have infidelity and they work through it. I just watched that Ashley Madison documentary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
Me
my gosh,
too.
that guy was so funny with his sunglasses. Like, our only competition is the Bible. Um, but like, you know, we also had a relationship expert on here, forever ago. She was a researcher. She said the majority of people cheat. Like the stat is, I don't know if that's the case, but that was her research. So it feels like sometimes there's things that I look at that I'm like, how does anybody work through that? How do you ever trust that person again? So what are some things that you find are just not workable based on all of the work you've done helping people with love?
Sure. Okay. I will get to that in just a moment. The first thing that I want to say though is because you're asking two things. One is what is not workable, and also what does one do when they are feeling frustrated in their relationship.
Mm.
So I'll start with the first one. If you're feeling frustrated in your relationship, the first thing to do is to look at yourself and to say how can I show up better in this relationship, because people, like, the very common thing is that people will suggest couples therapy, and they sit down in the couples therapist couch and they think the other person needs to change, whereas when we change ourselves, we have a great potential of changing the other because we're changing the dynamic.
Mhm.
And people in relationships tend to think, you know, people can very easily feel victimized. We're not talking about abuse or anything like that, but just feel like, oh, they don't communicate enough, or oh, they don't do this or that enough. And very rarely do people ask themselves, how am I contributing to whatever is not working right now?
Mm.
And what can I do to adjust my behavior and adjust the way that I communicate so that I can invite change in my partner?
Mm.
And so the first step is to look in the mirror and to create that change, because either way, You a proud moment in a person's life is when they can say, "You know what? I showed up. I'm doing the work." And if by changing your own behavior, you then change the dynamic and you see that there's a change in them, that's a beautiful thing to
Mm,
happen.
mm,
So the second part is, what is intolerable? Well, violence is intolerable.
mm,
You If you are in a relationship with someone who physically harms you, you must leave it right away and get whatever help. I don't Whatever you have to do, you must get help and you must leave. There
mm,
is no coming back from violence.
mm,
Um, you cannot stay in a relationship with someone who is physically harmful.
mm,
Even if they just did it one time, you must leave them, take the kids, do whatever you have to do, get a lawyer, get your family involved, get everyone involved, but
mm,
you stay. Um, I think that intolerable is also someone who is very emotionally abusive, which is a fine line because some people say they're abusing me. It's like, no, they're not. They may
mm,
not be very nice to you, or
mm,
they may be kind of like being kind of a jerk, but they're not abusing you. And emotional abuse is a lot of manipulation, um, persistent stonewalling, silent treatment, name calling. All of that is the intolerable.
mm,
As far as affairs, I I've worked with quite a few people who've recovered from affairs, and I think that Esther Perel is probably one of the best experts when it comes to helping couples recover from affair. Um, Look, I think that there's a lot of it depends. Like you can make a pact with your partner, like cheating means the end, and that's it.
mhm,
Um, and I helped a couple get over infidelity. Now they're stronger than ever because what was happening during the affair, there was so much, they were in such a dark place in their relationship. And so what had to happen is that he had to have a lot of remorse, but then they had to go to couples therapy to get to the root of their problems because the affair was a symptom.
mm,
So you have to, it's everyone has to decide that for themselves. But I also think, um, you could easily say it's intolerable when I'm in a relationship with someone who absolutely will not communicate.
mm, mm,
It's intolerable to me that my partner is avoidant because when the avoidant has all the power in a relationship, whoever can pull away constantly, they're constantly pulling away. They're not willing to do any work on it. They're not willing to collaborate with me on on healing this dynamic between us. That I would say get the hell out of that quickly.
mm, mm.
So yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. I feel like one thing that's really slippery for a lot of people listening, and like even for me, is I don't know if it's like I'm not like strong on astrology, but like I'm a Gemini, so people would think I love freedom, and I do. And I
Mhm.
think one of the biggest edges for me in relationship has been staying because I love to go be free. And so I think some people they have the flaw or whatever you want to call it of staying too long, and then
Mhm.
other people have the flaw of wanting grass is greener and they want
Yes.
to go.
Yes.
So I imagine with what you just shared, like this is intolerable, this is intolerable. The person that wants to go is going to find the intolerable things much more intolerable, much faster than the
Yes.
person who wants to go.
Yes.
Um, so I don't know if you have any
So
wisdom
this
for
is
the
where
person. Yeah,
self awareness comes into play,
right.
where to say like, do I have a habit of just like running at the first sign of strife?
Yeah.
Do I have a habit of just tolerating less than what I deserve and staying out of fear? So again, there's no one answer.
Yeah.
The only definitive answer I can give you is if there's abuse, you must get out.
Mm, mm,
Don't give them a second chance. Don't give them a chance even if they're in therapy, anger management, don't give them a chance because to bring our conversation full circle, Very few people change. And if someone has the capacity to be physically violent, it is going to take them years to
Mm,
change.
mm,
Years if they change. I mean, if someone has the capacity to cause you physical harm, there is a darkness in them that I don't want you to mess with. So,
mm.
say about that.
I love listening to like the energy of standards, and I don't know, kind of going back to selection matters, like looking back at like, is the person you're with somebody that values growth like you do, things like that. In the early days of meeting somebody, I know that a lot of people they maybe overvalue a connection and don't let it mature into a real relationship.
Yeah.
Um, what what are some ways that you would advise people to really take a look at somebody and really get to know somebody properly? Because, I know Gottman has that deck of questions you can get to know each other before you get married or move in. I think that's brilliant.
Yes.
But even then, like we are our own publicists. Sometimes we're relaying like good communications and we're not actually relaying the truth of where we're at. So, yeah, what wisdom would you have or some questions that you think are really key to ask in those early stages?
So you don't know a person until you see them outside of the bubble of your relationship. So you want to be able to understand their family relationships, their friendships. You want to see them out in the world. So you want to be able to be in, if it's just the two of you always hanging out in your own bubble, you don't really get to know a person. So
Mm,
that's really important. And and then you don't know a person until you've seen them under extreme stress.
mm,
You don't know a person, or you don't know how you don't know if someone is a right fit for you for partnership until you see how you've handled conflict together.
mm, mm.
And until you see those three things, you don't really know a person.
Well, and that's the thing too with conflict is like there's light conflict and then there's big conflict. Like I think about life events like the loss or like death of a family member where you're like
Yes.
really down and low or um I don't know, almost it's so subjective to kind of take a look at like what are those conflicts?
Well, I see the death of a loved one as not a conflict. I see that a life obstacle, a life event. A conflict is when the two of you are in an argument. You are not agreeing on something. You've hurt one another in some way. How do you repair?
Mm,
And then there is also, how do the two of you face big life events? And that's something that, takes time to
mm,
see.
mm. Um, and when you talk about like taking time and facing life events, it's such a slippery thing because I feel like it's a one-off thing that people could easily go into the story of like it was just this thing that they weren't great versus this revealed some of their character. And it feels kind of like a tightrope to like be able to make that judgment call. Um,
It's
yeah,
complicated. Yeah,
it
it's
is
very
complicated.
complicated, especially when you're dealing with the death of a loved one. It's you're dealing with a lot of intense emotion, and it's really about, the strength of a couple is determined by how well they are able to maintain connection or reconnect in the face of life's difficulties.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Um, when you are in conflict with someone, can you talk a little bit about like what are some of those green flags? Like what are some things to look for that maybe aren't so obvious? Because I think, obviously being with somebody that can communicate with you and find resolution with you is great. Um, yeah, and maybe what are some pitfalls? Like what are those two things we need to look out for that maybe are a little more light and nuanced in communicating and working through conflict?
Well, I think most people need to be honest with themselves about how they can be better at navigating conflict with another person, and not just look at through the lens of how are they with conflict? How are you with conflict?
Hmm.
What is your track record in relationships when it comes to repair? What do you need to improve on? So that's very, very, very important, because we can't go into the dating landscape and the relationship landscape thinking we are so evolved and it's about finding someone who's like at our level. It's like, no, we always have to eat a little slice of humble pie and say, where can I be better?
Mm,
Um, But I think, the most important thing about repairing conflict is communication, talking about it, wanting to repair,
Mhm,
making repair the priority. That's
mhm,
the most important thing that people don't even think about. It's like how important it is to repair,
mm, mm, mm.
because conflict is a part of relationship,
It is
but it's
wild.
about it's just about how well two people are committed to finding their way back to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess it's such a lifelong navigation. I see some couples that are such good matches and their conflict is so explosive that it lingers forever and it's like this poison in their relationship.
Yeah. Well, everyone is different. Some couples, they have these explosive arguments and they repair through sex.
Right.
Some couples, they repair through, over communicating. I mean, it also has to do with your family of origin. Like if you're two fiery people and you grew up in a fiery household where fights got loud, but then they dropped it. I mean, I think that, dropping it is very important, but it's just the level of communication. I think if you are with someone and it's a great relationship but you just don't repair well, that's where you pick up the book to
Right.
learn how to repair. That's when you seek out the couples counselor to learn how to repair. There's always going to be something that you're going to need to work on. That's part of wanting to grow in a relationship. It's like, let's see if we can be let's see if we can be better at this,
Mhm.
and see it as like a challenge, that an exciting challenge to take on.
Mm. Mm. Okay, so I guess as far as relationships go, you write so much, and I think a lot of your writing is so valuable for especially people who are anxiously attached, people
Mhm.
who spend a little more time being occupied about love versus
Mhm.
the avoidant people. Um, why do you think dating is so hard in this time? You know what I mean? Like, what is going on that? Um,
I think there's
yeah.
just this illusion that there's so many options out there.
Mm,
I think that's with the dating apps. It's like there's so many different options, and like, being able to swipe and seeing people not as actually human beings, but rather seeing them as this one dimensional picture that you can either swipe on or not, and so I think that that's a really, really big problem. I think that never have we been more starved for connection, but people are just um listen, this is not new. This has been going on for a while, where people hook up and they're not communicating their needs, they're not communicating their standards, they're not communicating their boundaries, their expectations. And so people like having a hard time dating, like that's not a new thing, but
yeah.
it's particularly hard now because it's because of, dating apps and this illusion that there's just so many options. There aren't that
Right.
many options of great people. You
Right.
have to do a little digging and a little searching.
Yeah.
And I also think that you know, people forgot how to do it the old-fashioned way. Is like, let me get introduced by someone. Let me take myself out for dinner or for coffee and sit alone and then just start, chatting with a stranger.
Mm,
Let me join some community center, and so I'm around like-minded people, and then meet someone through there. So I
mm,
think that that's part of what's made it um quite difficult.
mhm,
And I think that also there's uh, a lot of questioning around, marriage as an institution. And I think there's a lot more people who are committing to each other, but not actually getting married to each other.
mm,
Um, and I think there's so many different factors. I think there's the a lot of a lot of people are putting their careers in front of family,
mm,
so they're making their career trajectory more important than actually they're building a family with someone. So there's a lot of different variables, but for sure, this illusion that there's so many options.
mm, mm. Yeah, I love when I was reading your post. I mean, you have so many wonderful things. You put so much generous content out there for people. Um, a lot of people build connection and they want a sense of safety, but you've put a lot of content out about like how that's something that you have to start within yourself.
Mhm.
Um, can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of people are roaming around the dating pool or their relationship and they feel very unsafe. And
Mhm.
they probably don't really know how to even begin doing that in their relationship or with themselves.
So define what you mean today in this conversation by unsafe.
I don't think it's physical unsafety, but like emotional
Yeah.
unsafety. They don't feel
Yeah.
emotionally safe to be vulnerable. They don't really feel safe
Yeah.
to let the person really see them in their flaws or
Yeah.
see where they're not the best. And I feel like Instagram has really done wonders for all of us feeling like we need to be perfect. I mean, the filter
Social media in
alone.
general,
Yeah,
100%. Yes.
yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I think even for me with, like, anti-aging, like, I'm 37 years old and, like, the filters make me look like I'm 26, and, like, it's just as inspiring as it is toxic sometimes on these social
Yes.
media channels. So, um, yeah, I get that people are afraid to be vulnerable. I get that they're afraid to not be the prettiest person or, there's an overemphasis on looks or whatever it is that people are
Yes. Yeah.
thinking about. So, I met a girl who's in a new relationship and she told me she would wear her makeup when she slept over there for a while. Like, we just don't feel
Think
safe.
she wore her makeup to bed, like,
Yeah.
to yeah, yeah.
Yeah. She didn't want to be seen, and I get that. So just anything about like, what is it going to take for us to do that? Why does it matter? How can we create more of that in our relationship too?
I mean, vulnerability is where it's at. I think that people are actually drawn to vulnerability way more than they are to anything else. I think that, for example, I think uh, when I've asked many men how when they find their partner most attractive, and it's not when she's all dolled up with a bunch of makeup.
Yeah.
It's when she's smiling and happy and natural.
Mm,
And so I think there's a lot of social media has definitely done wonders, as you said. And I think there's a lot of also misinformation. And I think that, another part of like safety and security is finding it within yourself is, you know, a relationship is not the greatest relationship is going to, should add value to your life, but it's not going to pay your bills. It's not going to, or maybe it will pay your bills, but that relationship could end. You need to be able to pay your own bills. You need to be able to, um, know how to deal with your problems or have resources other than your partner to help you deal with the problems that you have in your life so that your relationship does not become the only source of security, emotional and otherwise. And that's what's really important. The other stuff is just a matter of just total confidence. And I think it's about really, um, you know, it's developing the parts to you that have nothing to do with your looks, like
mhm,
things that make you happy, interests, hobbies. This is what actually builds a person's self-esteem. If all they're relying on is their makeup or how they look, and they don't feel like they really have much else going on, that person's going to be insecure and
mhm,
isn't actually going to be authentic because they're too busy trying to seduce the person with their looks as opposed to coming to the table as a full package.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's really okay, so I know that safety is, sometimes we don't even feel like it's okay to face our feelings. We don't even feel like it's okay to be people with flaws that have things we're working on. And I know there's many different areas of that, right? Like there's our appearance, there's our money, our career. I think if there's anything I've learned, it's like people are always in transition. Like we're not actually ever arriving anywhere. Like I'm in transition with my body. Like I gained 10 pounds because I fell in love and it felt good and we ate a bunch of food. Like I'm in transition with
That's
my
nice.
body. Yeah, it was fun. And I also feel like I'm in transition with my career, right? Like I just started a new company. We've written more than 100 TEDx talks for people and booked more than 1,200 of them.
Wow.
It's like the amount of projects and parts of myself that are moving are so
Yeah.
many. How and I think that comes back to this safety of like it's always going to feel like we're up to something new. Um, how do you think someone can create more safety for their partner? Like we know that we have to find that home within ourselves to explore in the way you were talking about. But what about for someone else? How do we make it easier for people to share with us?
Well, love is not enough. The most important thing is you want to make a person feel seen and known and understood. So if you want to make someone feel safe, seek to understand them.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Um,
That's what makes people feel safe. And when people feel safe, they open up more in the relationship.
when you talk a lot about like the pain, like one of your Instagrams, you talked about like your when you choose somebody, you're choosing how their pain of their childhood has shown up in their adulthood.
Yes.
And obviously that there's a limit, right? Like their childhood wounds can't be like flying around the air
I
every
know it was interesting. There was a lot of misunderstanding around that one, which was very surprising to me.
Yeah,
It means choose wisely. Don't choose the person who has trauma that is impacting you in a negative way.
right.
Don't choose the person who had like if you're really triggered by being with someone with mommy or daddy issues that presents itself in a certain way, don't date them
Yeah,
because you need to accept them fully for who they are. Like their past and their trauma has you have to be okay with it. So
yeah.
choose wisely. People don't have a hall pass to just treat people poorly, but we all come to the table with wounds.
Mm,
So when you choose someone, you're choosing their wounds too. So make sure that you're cool with it.
mm, mhm.
Yeah.
It felt clear to me, but I think it's just
Good.
interesting
Yeah.
because, you know, there's so many wounds that I have from my upbringing, I don't even know. It's like
Totally.
I'm like, "Okay, I definitely know that my dad was, like, very preoccupied and didn't really get
Mhm.
present with me," and so sometimes I'll
Uh-huh.
repeat myself because 'cause I'm used to nobody hearing it, like,
Mhm.
I know
Mhm.
these wounds, right? But, like, there's so much yet to be discovered, and I guess that's the thing with having a partner. How do you set boundaries when your partner's wounds are showing up so strongly that you're not feeling like they're honoring your relationship? Like, how do you, like, I find that people are always working on things, and we wanna hold space for them to work on things. Um, do you have any suggestions for somebody who maybe has a partner that's going through a lot of trauma, but they love their partner and, they're trying to maybe take care of themselves as they navigate it, stay in their relationship?
I mean, again, it's all about is that person showing up for you. I mean, I think if someone's stuff is showing up, let's say they're not communicating or they're not communicating well or they're shutting down or anything like that, you just say, "Hey, like this is coming up for us and this is something I really think you need to work on. In order for me to be in this relationship, you need to work on this and let me know how I can help." And that's just it, just very directly.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm also thinking a lot about like the different stages of relationship. And I find this super fascinating for people because I know the honeymoon stage could last a long time or it can be quite shortened.
Yes.
Um, when it and that plays into childhood trauma, right? Like what stage are you in? Are the chemicals masking any trauma? And then all of a
Right,
sudden one
right.
stage ends and it's like a clusterfuck of trauma.
Uh-huh.
Do we communicate with people about these stages? Like I'm 8 months in with the person I think I want to marry, but again, we're new, right? We're still
Right.
learning. So yeah, any wisdom around these stages, what to expect, how to navigate?
Yeah, so the beginning stages is it's really fun, you're falling in love, but it's more infatuation. And it doesn't mean that you're not feeling love, is that the meaning that we give love changes as we become more emotionally connected to someone. So I would just say, like I said earlier, don't decide that someone is really it for you until you see how you've navigated conflict, until you see how they handle stress, how they handle your stress, um, you know, how, how you do when you travel together. These are like the really important things to
Mm,
recognize. And then of course the discussion around do we want kids, do we not want kids? What's a life well lived, and things like that.
mhm,
But, so I think that as we transition out of the falling in love stage to the more monotonous, if you will, uh, committed stage of the relationship, that's when people tend to panic because they're like, are we still in love? Is this love? Is this love? All that stuff the honeymoon is a lot of hormones doing the work for you. It's a
Mm,
lot of infatuation.
mm,
When you get to the more committed stage of a relationship, love becomes more of a choice. It becomes more of, I've chosen you, you've chosen me. And that means like when things get tough, we either see this as an opportunity to join forces and become allies.
mm,
So that it's us against the problem, or we're going to completely fall apart because we don't know what it actually means to be in a relationship and to love someone. And that's why I like to educate people on the fact that, like, you know, um, it should not be hard. Your relationship shouldn't be tough, but you'll go through seasons, and you've got two egos with two different backgrounds, two belief systems, two set of traumas. You're gonna disagree, and that's great, because guess what? There's nothing more boring than being in a relationship with someone who doesn't have their own mind.
mhm,
So if you both have your own minds, you're gonna wrestle with each other once in a while. It's the love is, how can I communicate this in a way that's so respectful of them?
mhm,
How can I learn more about what this person needs to feel loved by me and show up that way?
mhm, mhm,
Love deepening or not deepening is our choice. It's not the beginning. That those love feelings are not something we build. They just happen to us because they're more in line with infatuation. But what comes after is really truly our choice.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like I jumped around. I was trying to think of all the different types of humans
Mm.
that might be listening.
Yeah.
What have I not asked you about love that you think you just feel kind of called, if anything, to make sure people really get before we go?
Yeah. I would say that just don't get yourself into anything complicated
Mm, that's great.
where you don't know, yeah, where you don't know where you stand with someone, you don't know your relationship status with someone. Of course, it's in the very beginning when you start dating someone, there's a ton of uncertainty and you have to learn how to live with that uncertainty. But if you've been spending a lot of time with someone, you're sleeping with them, you're hanging out, and you're still not sure, that means that you're not communicating. And you don't want to get yourself into that. So that's my advice for people. Don't get yourself into something complicated.
Mm, I love that. That's so useful. Where can everybody find you? Like, I know Instagram is such a great place and we put it in the show notes. Is there somewhere else that we should send everyone?
Yeah, certainly my podcast, Jillian on Love. You can listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. And then I have a relationship school for women. That's through my website, jilliantarecki.com. And yeah, I'm on basically all social media platforms. And that's it. Oh, I also have a newsletter,
Oh, perfect.
which is called Love Weekly. Yeah.
Mm, I just want to acknowledge you. I think you remind me of some friends that I have that like are really getting seen because you're genuine and because you care. And I think that sometimes there's people on Instagram that are trying to be the guru, and you've really just come across like you really care about the readers and you're putting content out there with a real intention to guide them. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for tuning into the U-Turn podcast. And thank you again so much for our sponsors. We are here because of you. And to our listeners, thank you for checking out our sponsors. We always pick people and brands that we trust and we believe in. And just for listening to the show, writing your reviews on the Apple app, and just being willing to make your own U-turns. We'll see you next week.